Welcome to One Dime Radio. Today I'm here with Rob Ashton, who I think has the potential to be Canada's Bernie Sanders, if you don't mind me calling you that. In
Not
the
at
sense
all.
that he's in the sense that he's really a working class outsider trying to pull a major party back towards its roots, Canada's NDP, the New Democratic Party. And for those who aren't in Canada, who don't know, the NDP is the closest we have to a Labour Party, but many have complained that it's lost its roots because it's been in, frankly, an electoral crisis, losing support back to back and losing support from its major historic constituency, the working class. And Rob's a trade unionist, a labor leader out of the West Coast, and his instincts were not trained in the political class, not in Ottawa. And that's probably why, honestly, really, the most enthusiastic I've been about a Canadian politician has been your campaign for leadership of the NDP. And that's probably because you're not a politician. So
I appreciate.
it probably has something to do with it. And what better person to, bring a party back to its working class roots than someone from a working class organizing? I'll just say off the bat, you're not a career politician. What made you decide now to run for leadership of the NDP, given that you have not been a politics guy? You've been an organizing guy your whole life.
Because I've been an NDPer since I could vote, and I've loved the party because I know it's the Labour Party, it's the Workers' Party, and it's the party that actually represents Canadians as a whole and tries to lift people up. But what got me into this race was the devastation that we saw in the last election. The fact that cause plan worker Pierre Poilievre was having people buy into the comments that he's actually a working person, which 20 years in Ottawa, I think he's younger than I am. I'm 6 months shy of 50, so that doesn't give you a lot of time to have a working life. Now I don't know what he's done before that, and watching what's been happening over the last year or so with the party is we forgot how to communicate with people, the working class in general, but Canadians as a whole. And that really worried me because the NDP is a powerful force, and when I get elected leader on March 29th, what I'm bringing rank and file leadership experience. The union that I come from is a bottom-up union. It's led by its members, and I'm the voice for those members. And that's what we have to change the NDP to, is we have to be so top-heavy and go back to a system based on the members of the party. And that's the experience that I bring. I'm the only candidate in this race that actually has the experience in leading a group like that. And I know people's struggles. I'm tired of watching people having to work 2-3 jobs just to afford a place to live, if they can still afford a place to live. And it's about damn time that workers' voices are heard in the halls in Ottawa, in the buildings that Canadians built, that workers built, because we've been ignored for far too long, for far too many generations by Liberals and Conservatives. And that's quite a few of the reasons why I put my name in the race. I could talk for an hour alone on this, but I won't, because there's more questions, I'm sure.
Well, one of the first ones is why the NDP has lost so much support from, namely, the working class. And, I was also really annoyed by Pierre Poilievre being somehow able to position himself, out of all people, as the working man, the populist, even though he's probably the furthest thing from a populist, even, I genuinely don't think he's had a job outside of politics. People have speculated on that, but, he's a career politician. That's no secret. But I think the concerning thing is, despite Donald Trump effectively swinging our last election, which was going to go in favor of the Conservatives, but last minute really shifted it to the Liberals as they switched their party leader to Mark Carney, and you got Donald Trump threatening Canada, people swung to the Liberals, but not to the NDP. The NDP seems to have done worse than the last election. And that's, I think, where I was like, something's really got to change. Why do you think the NDP has lost the working class so much?
Because I kind of talked about in the last question there. It's because we stopped talking to people and we stopped listening to people and hearing their concerns. Like one of the biggest playbooks the NDP's had forever was, the terminology, bring your soapbox, stand on your soapbox and be heard. We stopped doing that. It was the Labor parties and the NDP that actually coined that term, and we built that. We stopped doing it. We stopped going to colleges. We stopped going to universities. And who moved in? The Conservatives did. People like that, I'm not even going to mention their names, they're not worth it. Conservatives moved in, and that's what we see now. Is they're going to talk to university students. They're going to talk to college students. We have to take our playbook back and change some of the plays so we can start being heard. We have to start focusing on issues such as housing, jobs, the affordability crisis that we're in right now, as well as international struggles that are going out there. And we have to go back and talk to our roots. And that's the main part of our campaign is like, know your past to know your future, going back to our roots. We have to go back to rural Canada because the CCF was created in rural Canada for the most part. This is what we have to do. We have to go and listen to people. We have to go where they're at. And that's what our campaign's doing. Our campaign's been so successful is we actually have people coming to every one of our meet and greets that are conservative voters that say they sign up to the party because they like what we're talking about. Right? This is what we have to do. We have to listen to them. And we have to be unapologetically loud when we fight for them. And to stop whispering in the halls of Ottawa and standing on the steps of every single community across this country and being loud about fighting for people and getting what we deserve. So that was a bit of why we lost and how we're going to get it back.
No, I like that. I like that a lot. Well, that's already one thing I sensed immediately was, one, by your demeanor and also the specificity of your policy program on labor specifically, by far the most sophisticated, specific laws on how to actually improve organization for workers in this country. And it shows that's, because you've lived it. So before we get into some of the very robust policies you have on how to improve organizing in this country and the conditions of workers, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself in terms of your background a little more? I said we mentioned you're a trade unionist, but just a little bit about your background, like, because I think that really matters for the people who, who want to see somebody who finally represents them.
Yeah, you bet. So I graduated from Burnaby North Senior Secondary School in 1994, and then I became a longshoreman that same year. And I've been a longshoreman now in the ports of Vancouver for 32 years. I've been the national president of our union, the International Longshore Warehouse Union of Canada, for the last 10 years. And I've been fighting corporate bosses for the last 20. Our union is a rank and file based union that the membership of our union lead us, and I'm the voice for it. I'm a dad, I'm a stepdad, I'm a grandpa. My grandkids call me Grandpa Whiskers, obviously. And I've seen the trials and tribulations of not having jobs in our communities through watching my kids and my stepkids grow up over the last few years. I've seen housing issues, I've seen job issues, I've seen issues with hospital waits, just like every other Canadian out there. I used to play hockey, rugby, baseball, which I quit when I was a kid, but I wish I didn't. It was the only sport that I could actually do good at. But now, people ask me, like, what's your hobby? And nowadays, quite frankly, my hobby is trying to make people's lives better. I work and I work and I work. I go watch my daughter play softball once in a while when I can. But my life is about making people's lives better. And what better way to do it than run for leadership of the NDP and rebuild our party? It's absolutely amazing. And one thing I used to do, I don't do much anymore. I used to hunt, but I was really bad at it. When I was in the bush, it was the safest the animals ever were.
Yeah, one of the prevailing criticisms that I've had on my channel often about the left is that left-wing parties and activist spaces have been far too captured by the professional managerial class. And, that's not to say that people from this class, and I don't really consider it like class, it's more of a, in a class in necessarily a strict economic sense, but more in a sociological sense, in the sense of white collar work, educational background. And I'm from this class, so it's not like, people from this class are enemies or whatever, but there is a great disconnect I've noticed over a long period. And I think, having someone like you as a leader and, which I haven't seen in a very long time, not just in, Canada, but even in left wing parties around the world have this same problem. I think that's a
Yep.
first step in the direction to understanding regular Canadians who don't have that specialized education, who, don't don't frankly understand the realities. And one of the things I noticed immediately in your policies was the policy regarding the visas effectively. Was it the TW program?
Oh yeah, temporary
And
foreign worker program. Yeah.
yeah, temporary foreign worker program. And that's been a real issue because a lot of Canadians have complained about immigration, some for very different reasons. And I think the right has definitely fed into that in a particular way. But what I think a lot of people who are out of touch on the issue don't understand is there is a real way in which this affects all Canadians, immigrants and native born Canadians. And that's the, declining labor power, the declining bargaining power and wages that comes with exploitative worker programs that allow people to come overseas, work on really exploitative conditions. It's,
Yep.
same reason why Bernie Sanders was against the H-1B visa program in the United States. When I saw you target this in your program, I was like, he gets it. Finally, someone who gets it. He explained to us a little bit about the ways in which you want to radically reform the laws of labor in this country.
Yeah. So when you look at the temporary foreign worker program, it has been created by the ruling class for the ruling class. It is, lack of better words, modern day slavery. Because when that migrant worker comes over to make a better life for themselves, they walk into a situation where their boss owns them and they can't do anything else. They can't fight for health and safety on the job. They can't fight for better wages. They can't unionize. They can't do nothing because if they squawk, they're gone. Right? Like I'm the son of a migrant, of an immigrant. My mom come from Ireland, and thankfully she was able to stay in the country, or we would probably maybe have to do this interview while I'm in Ireland, or I might not even be here. And so why do I want to get rid of this so bad? Because it doesn't work. We all know that. And so it is so bad that people like Pierre Poilievre can tell you that it's your neighbor's fault that your life is so tough, that you have a tough life, that you can't afford a home, or you can't afford the food in the grocery store, or you can't get a good paying job because of these people that are allegedly coming stealing your jobs. No, it's because the policies that the ruling class have written for years and years and years, decades even, where it only represents the employing class, the ruling class. So yeah, we want to get rid of it. And what we want to put in its place is we want to put a policy in place that protects people's wages by holding employers accountable. When everybody's doing the same job, they should be getting paid proper wages. Right? That way, people like Pierre and people like him can't walk around saying it's that person's fault that that you get paid so little. You know, our new program is going to stop the race to the bottom. It's going to help lift people up. It's going to give people a pathway to permanent residency, and it gives people power. because it's going to give people the ability that if that boss is a POS, you can unionize, or you can go find another job somewhere else, because it's about control for the other side. It's about holding us underwater, everybody, migrant workers, Canadian citizens, permanent residents, and we have to take their power from them. And the only way we take their power from them is by changing their rules. And that's what we have to do, and that's what I will do, is we'll change their rules and put our rules in place that'll make life better for everybody.
It's a great irony that Pierre Poilievre will now try to, tap into the immigration rhetoric. Meanwhile, it was Stephen Harper who expanded the TW program the most.
Yep.
And that brought in basically this huge army of migrant workers who worked under horrible exploitative conditions. So he basically increased migration while tightening the ability to get citizenship, which really you end up getting the worst of both worlds. You end up effectively actually having this, division between workers that, like it pits workers against each other on a real economic level and makes it harder for, in the long term for migrants to integrate into this country. So it's like, it's really just, increasing them as economic units rather than
Yep.
wanting to bring new citizens. So it's a
Yeah.
really terrible policy. And one of the things I found annoying about the left and liberal side for so long is they just kind of dismissed the concern about immigration, whereas we have us on the left, we need a proper response to it. And I think your plan is pretty much, the closest to that. Of
There's just one more point that I want to make on this subject, if I
course.
can, is employers will actually have to prove that they can't find Canadian workers. So I'm going to give you one quick example here. So my union represents seafarers, and so what happens now is a vessel comes in that's foreign flagged, which means it sails between two different countries, and comes and has to work in Canadian waters. That vessel now has to be crewed by Canadian citizens. And so what these employers do, and the government doesn't give a flying rat's ass about it, because we've been trying to change this, is instead of putting a Canadian wage rate on that job, for example, a ship's cook on the West Coast, say they make 35, 40 bucks an hour. When that vessel comes in to work in Canadian waters, instead of putting the Canadian wage rate in, they leave the foreign seafarer rate in, which is, oh my God, man, it's horrible. Like you're looking at 12, 13 bucks an hour, maybe a couple bucks more, maybe a couple bucks less. And then they look for Canadians to go take that job. Nobody's going to take the job. So we've been telling them, raise those wages up to Canadian standards, and then you'll get Canadians working on those damn vessels. And if they're specialized ships, fine, put a foreign seafarer on that vessel, pay them Canadian rates of pay, and then train a Canadian seafarer to do that job if we don't have any. But liberal governments and conservative governments don't want to do that because it gives us too much power. And it takes away the strength of these companies to hold our heads down and to be able to make more profit by not hiring Canadians.
Definitely. And you have a whole host of other legislative changes you want to make to increase unionization in this country. What are some of those changes in which will allow Canadians to finally get unionization up? Because that's been a big struggle, frankly. Like unionization is at a big low, and some people say just organize, but there's strict conditions that make that pretty damn hard, as you know. So how
Yeah.
would under a hypothetical Rob Ashton NDP government would people be able to organize more easily with the changes you want to bring?
So there's a couple of key pieces here. So right now under Canadian law, when a group wants to organize an employer, the union has to sign up cards, sends it to the labor board, and then there's a vote. But in between signing up the workers and the vote, the employer is allowed to, not allowed to, but they do anyways. They have secret meetings with the employees. They badmouth the union. They lie about the union. They tell people that if they sign up to the union and the union comes in, they're going to have to close down the shop and then they're going to move away. So we're going to make unionization easier for people. So we're going to bring back one-step union certification and crack down on union busting tactics, like what's happened just recently in Halifax with Ubisoft. I know it's not confirmed or not, but these workers did what they're allowed to do under our charter. They signed union cards. They became members of the CWA. And then what happens? Ubisoft, not too long after that, shuts them down and leaves. If that's not union busting, I don't know what is. It's the same thing. It's the exact same thing what Amazon did in Quebec. These workers were standing up for their rights because everybody knows that Amazon's a shit employer and treats their workers like garbage. Amazon shuts down a warehouse and puts these workers out of work. These companies that do that have to be punished. And then on the other side of it, when workers are unionized, we have to protect our right to strike. We have to protect our right to freely negotiate without government interference. And so this is why the repeal of Section 107 out of the Labor Code is so important. Is Section 107 of the Labor Code says that one minister, right now I think it's the Minister of Jobs, Carney doesn't even have the ability to give us our own minister. We used to have ministers of labors and they got rid of it. But the old Minister of Labor, now the Minister of Jobs, but by a stroke of a pen can end a strike or end a lockout. That gives the employer so much power because they know that they don't have to talk to unions, they don't have to talk to workers, because the government will step in and do their job for them. So thankfully, the NDP has put a bill forward, a private member's bill, to repeal 107. We'll see how much Liberals and Conservatives actually support working Canadians. I'll guarantee you that they don't vote for it. If they do, holy moly, hell must have froze over if they actually vote for it.
And that's absolutely insane, given there's already pretty bad legislation like the right to work laws that, has made it way harder to organize for Canadians compared to, say, even the 1930s and 40s.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, the labor laws have changed so much since back then because the employer knows that if they change the laws to be able to hold on to us, that it's harder for us to actually affect change. Right? Like the anti-scab law that they put in, it wasn't the Liberals that put that in. It wasn't the Liberals that put pharmacare in or dental or you name it, all the changes that we got that were good for us Canadian citizens. It was the NDP that brought that in, but we didn't communicate that enough, right? We got anti-scab legislation, and then the employer uses Section 107 on us to end strikes, right? They only do it when it benefits their employer buddies. They don't do it when it might help workers out. There was workers in Quebec on the docks that were locked out for damn near 2 years. Nobody stepped in to help those workers out. The government did give a flying rat's ass for them because that employer was still working using scabs and they were still making money while these poor workers were suffering, just standing up for themselves. And they're not fighting mom and pop companies. They're fighting multi-billion-dollar corporations out there. All right. I will now get off my soapbox for this question.
No, I think it's well warranted. It's well warranted because we haven't really. We've only had people capitalize on the anger that people feel by appealing to them as plebiscites, not trying to actually empower them, right?
You're right.
Like Donald Trump.
But when we elect good progressive governments, laws change. And so you look what's happening right now in Manitoba with the Manitoba NDP in power and Wab as premier. They're bringing in anti-scab legislation. They're bringing in card check for the working class. because they're good governments. They're governments that that listen to the citizens of their province, and they want to do right by them while still allowing industries to grow. And it's not a scary concept. It's just liberals and conservatives alike make people think, oh my God, if we change the labor laws, or oh my God, if we do something that's going to help Canadians and the working class, oh my God, the sky is going to fall. It's not. It's just going to make life better for the working class and make life better for every single person in this country. And they just won't make as much profit.
It's funny you mentioned Wab Kinew. Years ago, I was thinking he would be a great person to run leader of the NDP, and he's been quite popular. And as a premier of Manitoba, been quite adept in his political instincts too on issues like crime. Kind of really listening to what people have been saying and wanting. But we've been talking about unions, and I think because union density has been so low,
Yep.
a lot of people might forget, what unions actually bring for them. Like, so what would you say to Canadian workers who are not unionized, who, in what ways would having them be organized help them? And also for ones who, might just not end up joining a union, because of course not
Yeah.
not every workplace is the same, not every sector is the same. So what would you say to
Yep.
those Canadians?
So to the workers that feel that unions may be outdated or not needed, or they're thinking about it, but they're kind of on the fence, there's a simple question to ask yourself. Why does my boss not want this union in here? Why are the bosses in the world fighting so hard to keep the labor laws the way they are? Why do bosses threaten workers that want to unionize? Why are they so afraid of unions? Because unions stand up for each other. When you have one single voice speaking for the whole, you have more power instead of individuals going up. And with a union in play, you can't have employers using one worker against the other, because they got to deal with the union. And the union is the membership of that union. And that's the beauty of it. And that's the one thing that some people don't understand, or some people might forget, is that the union is the members, right? And the union fights for its members. So you're fighting to help out your coworkers, your union family members. And for people that can't unionize in the industry, or maybe they just don't want to unionize, what does an NDP government led by Rob Ashton do for them? We change the labor code. We make life easier for them. We make life better for them. So Stephen Harper's government changed the definition of unsafe work in the labor code. And it used to be something that could, and I'm paraphrasing, right? So something that could hurt you or kill you. The definitions changed to make it easier for employers to skirt around safety laws. So we'll make sure that we'll change the labor laws so that you can go home to your family in one piece at the end of the day. So you can go home to your family, period. If it's unsafe, it's unsafe. Doesn't matter if it's going to kill you today or tomorrow. It's unsafe. Doesn't matter if you're going to get asbestosis from working in asbestos today, or 35, 40, 60 years from now. If it's unsafe, it's unsafe. Wages. Like, you look at the minimum wage federally, it's the shits. People can't live off of that. We have to make sure, and this is what an NDP government led by me will do, is we'll make sure that people will get paid a fair, whether they're in a unionized environment or not. And I'm going to try to turn some people's minds. It's unions that got parental leave for Canadians. It's unions that got pharmacare, childcare. Hell, we all like going out on a Friday night or a Saturday night, or if you're working shift work, or if you're working 4 on, 4 off, or a week on, week off, whatever your Friday is, that's your Friday, and the next day is your Saturday. Those were brought to you by the unions. Not because the boss, the ruling class was like, we got to stop working these workers 80 hours a week because we're so good. We should give them the weekend. That never happened, never would happen. Every good thing we ever got in this world is because we fought for it. But they change the rules on us every chance they get. So it's our turn to change the rules on them.
Yeah, indeed. That time period that people romanticize when an adult could provide for their whole family with a full-time job, right? Provide a a fairly large family. It's not even enough for one child now. It's like enough to pay a rent and save a little bit, if that.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like back then, why were wages higher and why were there more guarantees? It didn't come out of the sky. It's like there's a labor movement.
Yeah,
And you can't do anything without a labor movement.
I don't even know if the wages were higher back then, because they weren't. Because I used to look at our agreements, but life was affordable, right? Because corporations, I'm not going to pretend I know what corporations think like, especially back then, but you could afford to buy a home. You could afford to rent a home. You could afford to go buy groceries for your family. Right? Like I'm looking for an apartment to rent right now for my daughter and I. A 2-bedroom condo where I live is $2,500 a month. Like, it's ridiculous. It's like, no wonder some people are like all balled up in a knot, because it's so hard to live, because we've been following their rules for so long. We have to change those rules.
For sure. That brings us, a big question for the past few years, which is inflation. And, how do we bring that down? And how would the legislation you propose avoid increasing inflation? Because some people who like to make this sort of argument about unions, they like to say, well, if we are able to bargain for higher wages, what's stopping the employers from just, paying the higher cost of labor by just raising the prices? So how would we avoid that?
Yeah. So that's an argument that the ruling class always likes to make, because then everybody goes, well, maybe we shouldn't ask for more money. Maybe we should be happy with what we got. No, that's BS. Interest rates went up to what, 7%? Or inflation went up to 7%, 8%, whatever the hell it was just recently. Like, it was a gross number. You think wages went up right before that by 7, 8%? No, not even close. Wages have nothing to do with inflation. Inflation is just a product of the ruling class wanted to make more money, causing grief, fixing prices. Inflation is caused by the ruling class, not by the working class. Prices of everything being so bloody expensive is caused by the ruling class, not the working class. Because that person out there in the prairies or in Quebec that's working for $20 an hour, if they wanted to make a living wage, I don't know, say the living wage in Montreal is, I don't know, say $25 an hour, just picking a number. And remember, a living wage is like, you pay for your food, you pay for your home, and a couple incidentals. That's what a living wage is. Going for 20 to $25 an hour isn't going to cause inflation. Not even close. It's going to give that person a better way of living. They might actually be able to, live a bit better, but even a living wage doesn't cut it. Because we should be paid and we should be taken care of by employers where we can actually go buy a steak, where we can We can go on a vacation, for crying out loud. And so that's a part of what our mandate is with the Bank of Canada that we'll put in. It'll be a two-piece mandate. Right? The first part, yeah, keep inflation in check. 100%. Keep it in check. Right? Keep those employers under control. But they also have to look at keeping full employment in this country. Because that's the responsibility of government. That's the responsibility of the Bank of Canada, is to make sure Canadians have jobs to go to make sure that we can have a way of life. Because right now, the Bank of Canada only works for the ruling class. It does nothing for the working class. And so these are the protections that we live in. We live in an incredibly rich country. Incredibly. You just look at our natural resources. If we better manage them, hell, even if we own some of them, like we used to. Saskatchewan used to have the potash corp where we own the potash of Canada. We had Petro Canada. We owned the gas. We owned the oil in this country. We own the railways. We own the airplanes. And the ruling class got rid of it so their corporate buddies can make more money off of us. We have to get back doing that. We have to get back to owning stuff. We have to concentrate on building jobs in Canadian industries that create other industries in this country so that we can do better, so that our children can do better, so that they're not worried about, like, my God, man, if I drop dead tomorrow, I don't know what would happen to my kid. Like, I really don't. And this scares the hell out of me every day.
Yeah, and youth unemployment set, quite a high. It's a huge crisis. And I liked the thing you alluded to a bunch of things I was going to ask about there. For those who've been listening to my show will know that, there's a big interest on modern money. We've talked a lot about stuff like the job guarantee, which is in your plan. And I really like this emphasis of reforming the Bank of Canada to change what its target is. Because right now it's not for full employment, it's to have just the right rate of unemployment. It wants a natural rate of unemployment, which keeps enough people unemployed so you can have a reserve army of labor so that workers are more dispensable and have less power over the employers.
And so the
And that's
ruling
a huge
class, can divide us and pit worker against worker for that one job that pays them $10 an hour, instead of workers being
right?
able to have the power to say, you know what, you're a jerk. I'm going to go over there where that person actually respects me a little bit more.
That's a great point, because then capitalism would actually work like how its advocates, pretended it works, which is, oh, well, you have the freedom to go work wherever you want. You can go to this job to that job, but no, you can't. Every, everyone knows that's bullshit, right?
Mm-hmm.
But under a legislation where there actually was full employment, you would have more leverage to actually switch to different jobs. And I really like that, the job guarantee. How would we, achieve full employment in terms of what industries would new jobs be created? And would it be the government doing that, or it would be the mixture of the government and the private sector? In what ways would your program boost new high-paying jobs?
So, there's a couple of industries that we can look at. And one of them that comes to my mind all the time, it's because I work by the water, is shipbuilding, right? And so if we invested in our shipbuilding in this country, like they have in Halifax, under an NDP provincial government, mind you, where they tied investment into Irving shipyards into jobs, they went from, in 2011, 300 jobs approximately to 3,000 jobs roughly today, direct, plus 10,000 indirect jobs. And so what does this look like? Yeah, it'll be public sector jobs that are created and private sector jobs that are created for sure. We're going to be investing in the care economy. We're going to be building homes and roads, which creates jobs. We have to go and talk to Unifor. And we have to get Unifor's input and actually utilize Unifor's input on how to bring our cars back, on how to bring automotive industry back to Canada. Because they're the ones that know. Not GM or like not Ford or any of them. It's the workers that know, right? We have to put emphasis on agriculture and growing food and figuring out how to help farmers make a better life. We have to train doctors. We have to train respiratory therapists, care aides, but then we have to have places for them to go. Like look at care aides for an example. Care aides have some of the toughest jobs in this country. We don't have enough places for the generation that come before mine, right? Like I've got a daughter that works as a care aide, Emma. And she was telling me a story the other day where she had to get somebody to, she was attacked at work by somebody that she takes care of. Bite marks up and down her arm. And she said that the saddest part about that whole thing was there's nowhere for that person to go. And so when, like, there should be more locations where people have a place to be safe in the care economy, workers and people that are being taken care of. But there's not enough places like that. We have to invest in people. And that's what our jobs promise is about investing in Canadians, investing in people to make sure everybody's life is better. And when you invest in people, good things happen, jobs happen. You got college and university kids that are coming out that there's no jobs for them anywhere. But if we start growing our industries in this country, there will be. And when we invest in people, when we invest in our communities, instead of investing in the automotive industry, you give them billions of dollars and then they piss right off and they take the jobs with them for no reason. Because some guy south of the border says they have to go. We have to make sure these jobs are tied to our communities. And so we have to talk to the workers. To make sure that as an NDP government, we know exactly how to tie those jobs to the community. We have to find out what the community needs. It's a hospital, it's a school, whatever it is. Homes. This is the biggest push of our jobs promise. Like for instance, in Quebec, there's an aluminum smelter that they make the aluminum for like soda cans or tin cans for you put your Chef Boyardee or whatever in. And then there's a liner inside of it. We send the aluminums down south, they put the liner in, and then it comes back. Why don't we do that here? Why don't we put the liner in the fucking can? Come on. Gives us jobs. Show that guy south of the border a little bit of his own medicine.
This critique of free trade was something that I remember even Jack Layton was voicing back in the day when he was leader of the NDP, the late great Jack Layton. And this technocratic sort of neoliberal critique I would always hear is, oh, this protectionism is a bad idea because it's far more efficient to allow for capital mobility. And then now we're seeing with Donald Trump just how fragile that world is of the free trade. And now people are realizing we need to actually rebuild industry in this country. The protectionists were right.
Oh, yeah. I think it was Mulrooney that started this. So all their
free
buddies
trade, you mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that all his partners can make more money. Right? It
Definitely.
it doesn't do, like we used to have, before free trade agreements, we had industries in this country, industries that did well. Any trade that we create, whether it's with the Americans or the Swiss or the English or Australia, wherever, Vietnam, trade deals have to be focused on workers. So that if they take, I'll look at telecommunications. All the call centers we used to have in here are farmed out because that employer makes more profit by farming those jobs out. If we create free trade agreements, why isn't it built in there that those workers in that other country don't get less wages than those jobs here, especially if they come from Canada? Workers have to be the center of every single free trade agreement that we do, that we make, on both sides of the agreement. We can't worry about our stuff being, like, our jobs being shipped away because it's cheaper somewhere else. Those workers need to be protected as well. We can't be afraid that our jobs are going to disappear because we have to be protected. And that's what we have to do when we make trade agreements.
Indeed. Yeah. If we were to call ourselves a democracy, right, you'd think that there would be labor be represented as much as capital is, but everyone knows that's not true. It's the capital that's represented. Democracy might exist on the political level to a limited extent, but certainly not at the economic realm. And that's where it needs to be expanded the most. I've been advocating. Now, I got to address with protectionism, the one question, another like critique I often hear of protectionism is how do you prevent it from being corporate welfare? How do you prevent it from the government just kind of bailing out another set of capitalists, frankly, that happen to be Canadian?
It's what we've been saying all along, right? What it is if we have to bail out companies, because yeah, it happens from time to time, that money has to be tied to jobs, right? Tied to employment. Instead of just giving them a check and saying, see you later, and then they pay their CEO and their exec and their board of directors or whatever the hell a piss pot full of money. You know, if they want the Canadian government's help, that money's getting tied to the workers. If you pay your CEO what they're paying their some companies is like 200+%, 250% more than they're paying their workers. You're cutting your CEO's wage because, I'm sorry, that guy doesn't build your products. It's the workers on the shop floor that build their products. And if you don't, so one of our policies, our platforms, is that if you pay your CEO over 50% more than what you pay your workers, you're going to be paying a penalty. Because that person on the shop floor is making everything so that that company can make money. And we're the ones struggling. Governments have to work for the people, not for the 1%. And the thing that we all have to remember is when we stand together, when we fight together, we'll win together. And that's the key to this whole thing. Because they'll be scared shitless, my friend.
Yeah, especially if they're, the workers are actually empowered. And that brings us to another thing I thought was a big standout in your campaign is other candidates on the left often talk about wealth redistribution. And, I'm not against that. I assume, I assume you're not against that either, but you have a more, I would say, you get at the heart of the issue with pre-distribution. Talk about pre-distribution. What is that difference? And because, it's highly linked, obviously, to unionization and the distribution of economic power.
Yeah, so we have to, when we talk about pre-distribution, we have to look at like redistribution is when we like how I classify it is when you pay your income tax and we try to make your life better that way, right? Pre-distribution is about who owns the means of production, who creates the wealth for that corporation or for the country. It's workers. So we should be gaining the benefits of it. We should be the ones that sit on boards of directors so we can help make decisions of that company. We should be in the halls of Ottawa making the decisions. You see, like our building homes, that is a part of the pre-distribution of wealth because we're making it less expensive for people, you know. And that's a decision by the Canadian people to do that. You know, Mark Carney said something in his Davos speech, which I took very flattering because I say it all the time. We have to be at the table because if we're not at the table, we're on the menu. And I'm tired of being on the menu. And I said it in my opening on October 2nd. It's time for them to be on the menu. It's time for us to eat the rich. And how do we do that? It's by getting to the wealth creation, taxing the wealth creation, fair tax systems for the country, built for Canadians, not the ruling class like it is now.
And with high unionization, that already distributes economic power from the get-go by having people have better wages, a bigger slice of that economic pie. And
Yeah.
I might remind listeners that in a lot of the Nordic countries, they don't even have a minimum wage because they don't need one. They have such high unionization rates that the workers themselves bargain with the employers for the wages, and that is far better than having the government set the minimum wage. So, you know, that's maybe we can get there eventually in this country, but it'll take a lot of work.
True story.
And one of your policies was having workers on, workers' seats on corporate boards, actually
Yep.
being a seat at the table. And relevant to what you literally just said about, being on the menu. How do we, it, what does that look like at a practical level? And what does that mean for workers in terms of, being on corporate boards, and what
Yep.
other policies regarding what's often called like workplace democracy, worker democracy, would you support? Because it's a topic I'm quite interested in as well in general. Like,
So the reason why I like the idea of workers on the board of directors so much is so through my position as president of ILW Canada, I'm the Dockers rep or the longshore rep for Canada for the International Transport Workers Federation, which is a global federation of hundreds of unions, if not like way more than that. And some of the European unions that I became friends with and talked to, this is what they have in their country. And it becomes appealing to me because if you have somebody like one of the 1%ers or board of directors, CEOs sitting in their boardrooms, all they looking at is numbers. They're not looking at what is actually happening on the shop floor. They're not actually looking at solutions that will not only help the company but also help the workers. They're looking at where can we send the company to be the cheapest type of stuff. And so if you have a worker on the board of directors, that worker will have the exact same voting power. That worker representative will be able to discuss issues that are happening from the worker's point of view on the shop floor, what they have to do better, the machines that they might need to get, health and safety from the shop floor, right? They can have veto power. They can have more transparency of the decisions that happen on the board of directors level. And this is the kind of stuff that I'm getting from my European counterparts, is that they have their reps on the boards have an ability to talk to their employers at the same level about collective bargaining before you get the bargaining, like issues that are happening midterm. So that maybe when you get to collective bargaining, you're not fighting the whole goddamn thing. You've maybe got stuff smoothed out a bit. It's about an equalization of power. It's about actually making the corporation better as well. Because you bring a worker's point of view, somebody that's done it their entire life maybe. They know what needs to be done to make that company profitable, because there is not too many people that have been working in a job for 10, 20, or 30 years that are going to go sit on that board and go, how do I shut this company down? Because they're all a bunch of bastards. They might be all a bunch of bastards, but you're going to want to make sure that company's profitable well into the future, and make sure that your coworkers are getting their fair cut because they deserve it. That's the whole basis of this. More worker power.
Now, how do you feel about worker ownership, like workers owning a certain percentage of stock in their companies and stuff like that?
I got no issues with it. Why can't we own some of the company? Why can't we own the thing? There's a mill in BC that was shutting down, and then the workers took it over with the help of the province.
Oh, Bob's, was that, wait, Bob's Red Mill?
I think so. The name escapes me right now.
Because there's a place where I buy my oats, and it's a worker cooperative, and the owner.
No, this is a lumber mill.
Oh, okay, never mind.
And the place is booming now. Right? But actually, yeah, it was just the worker cooperatives work. Right? Like, why don't we own stuff? Like it works. And when workers have more say and workers have more power, that company does better. Way better.
Man, the incentives are pretty obvious in that one too. It's like you don't have the incentives problem with that you've had with, like, Soviet style socialism, because you have a stake in it. You'd want to work harder.
Well,
you
yeah,
reap the reward.
100%. If I own stake in my and I don't play the stock market because I don't have the money to, but like if you owned a piece of that company, yeah, you're going to want it to do well. Like you are. But better yet, let's own the whole damn thing.
I guess the question is raised there is, how would that be facilitated in terms of that power transfer? Because, how would you see that happening just before the haters come for you and say that they're, you're like Joseph Stalin, going to seize everyone's property or whatever?
No, like if, like the mill was going out of business. And the workers they stepped up, said, you know what, we can run it. We can do a good job at running it. And they did run it. And it's doing way better now that it was owned by workers. Like, I'm not saying we're going to go in and take over every single company out there. Like, no. But if there's an opportunity to allow the workers to own the means of production, then we own the means of production. It's simple. And one more thing, I have a better mustache than Stalin ever did.
Yeah. So, like, credit unions, would you support, like, increase funding for credit unions to help facilitate that? Because obviously, some people will say, well, what's stopping anyone from starting a worker cooperative, right? But it's obviously quite hard when you're competing with big capitalists. So you need some help with that. And I mean, capitalists get all this help with banks all the time. So why not have, banks for ordinary people?
So there is banks for ordinary people.
Mhm.
They're called credit unions. I bank with Community Savings here in British Columbia. Great bank. They take care of the workers. They do everything they can to help you out. I think I think I think it's Desjardins in Quebec. So there's a lot of things out there. And you know what? If the government of Canada wants to hand out billions of dollars to oil companies, automakers, planes like Air Canada, why not give some of these owner cooperatives a helping hand too, but tie it to jobs? But guess what? Because it's owned by the workers, there's going to be jobs because it's beneficial to everybody there. What's good for the goose is good for the gander.
You sort of alluded to it before with shipbuilding, but one thing I thought was quite interesting is you support defense procurement as job creation if it will help build domestic capacity tied to shipbuilding. What does your policy look like when it comes to industrialization and it's linked to the military? Because some people look at military in just one way, just cut spending. But question interests me a lot because I've been looking a lot into policy proposals that, involve essentially reindustrialization, involve job creation with the military, using it beyond a, imperialistic force. And because it's an institution with quite a lot of legitimacy and a lot of power to get things done, which is very hard in a federalist system like ours with all these different provinces. So yeah, well, what is your policy regarding, building and its connection to the military?
So when we're looking at Canada's military, liberal and conservative governments have underfunded our military people and their support staff, their support for decades, right? And and they're members of the working class as well, right? So we have to produce like proper equipment for them to utilize in their jobs. And their jobs are they're there to defend us. They're there to go peacekeeping. That's the military I miss is when we were a peacekeeping force. We have to give them safe equipment to utilize. We can't have Chinooks falling out of the air on practice runs, on training missions. Right? We have to give them housing, good housing, when they're active. We have to take care of our veterans when they come home because people forget about the veterans. Right? Under my leadership, Canada won't be building an invading army. We'll be building one that protects our coasts. We got a lot of coastline. The Canadian military supports our population in natural disasters, whether they're natural or man-made disasters. The military provides good support jobs, and it's good jobs. People like working in the military world. You know, we always have to put the workers first, and our military are workers. And I don't mind investing in our military. And remember, the Coast Guard's part of the military too. And so they have to be taken care of as well. The people who serve our country in uniform and the people that support them, they deserve our support, they deserve our respect, and they deserve Canada and its citizens' ability to give them a safe and secure working environment, just like any other worker out there, man.
So while we're at it, might as well go straight into your energy policy or environmental policy, because this military will be pretty damn important in dealing with climate crisis. Just the reality is this is a huge problem, and with an institution like that will be quite important. But what I liked about your climate policy is that it simultaneously tackles the issue of climate change while being very realist. And I think there's, on the environment issue, environmental activists have lost a lot of support from the working class
Yep.
due to some policies that are kind of, far out there for them. You're pro-nuclear, and you have a plan for, essentially transitioning to a greener economy without destroying the jobs of and livelihoods of many Canadians. So, what exactly is Rob Ashton's climate policy? Because this is the discussion of contention between you and some of the other candidates. Let's just say that.
So, well, you're visiting a province right now here in British Columbia that burns for 4 months of the year. You're in a province right now that a couple of those months it floods so bad with atmospheric rivers that it wipes out bridges and it cuts the lower mainland off. So we do have to make changes in the way we do business. But when we make those changes, we have to keep the workers in mind, right? We can't just say we're going to go this alone. We're going to do everything. We're going to shut everything down and blah blah blah. Because that's what conservatives and liberals alike want us to do. Because that splits the working class. And when I say working class, I mean everybody that doesn't hold the means of production. Right? That's people that go to work every day, people that can't find a job for whatever reason or don't work for whatever reason, people on disability, our seniors, teachers, like you name it, you're a part of the working class. So transition that's based and centered around the working class works. And so we have to look at creating in Canada. This is the country, right? So now we're getting to stuff that we have to start owning as a nation and not selling off to private corporations like Doug Ford and his crew in Ontario. Is we want to put nuclear in. Your community's good with it. Indigenous nations are good with it. They've given their free, prior, and informed consent. Let's do it. But it has to be a Canadian reactor. It's got to be one of the, I think they're called can-do reactors. Good place to work. Pays pretty good from what I hear. And it's a greener form of energy, right? And the little bit that I know about it, the Canadian reactors that we have don't mess around with you don't have to mess around with I don't know the technical terms, I'm sorry. You don't have to mess around with the uranium like you have to do for the American reactors. And the nuclear reactors in this country are represented by the United Steelworkers. It's a unionized job site. We have to look at other ways of creating our east-west energy grid, whether that's hydroelectricity, geothermal, or wind farms, right? We have to do that, right? And these sectors can be unionized. But the biggest thing that we have to think about is keeping the workers coming along with us. Because division is the weapon of the boss. And when they divide the working class, they win. They win all day long. My union started working with environmental groups to try to stop Roberts Bank Terminal 2 a few years back, which is a fully automated terminal. They don't say it's fully automated, but it is. Where they're going to fill in the ocean and make an island and then put a fully automated terminal on. So we started working with environmental groups to try to stop it. Because we were both walking down the same path, but our paths never merged together. And so when they finally did, we had a stronger voice, we had a louder voice, and we learned about each other. And we accepted the fact that we might not agree on every project out there, but at least we'll have an ability to communicate and we won't be split by the boss. And so what happens now? Hell, I talk about the environment now. they talk about the working class, about jobs, sorry. And that would never have happened if we decided to stay on opposite sides of the road. And that's what we have to come back to, is having hard conversations about the environment and about jobs. But remember, we have to bring the workers along with it. And, the steel workers have been doing that for a very long time. And the first union to endorse me too, which I'm very happy and proud of.
What is your plan for Alberta? Because this is a pretty important topic when it comes to energy, of course, obviously, and also keeping the country together, given that, there's the talks about spheres of separation, real or imagined or possible. How would you prevent essentially from the fear that many Albertans have, which is an NDP government would, destroy all of their jobs because, of course, oil, is a big source of employment in Alberta.
Yeah. It is a big source of employment in Alberta. In regards to the tanker ban, like the people of British Columbia have spoken, like the tanker ban's not being lifted. And so we have to look at other ways to work with Alberta, right? Any project that gets considered needs, first off, free, prior, and informed consent from Indigenous nations, needs community support, the whole route. And I say this every time I say it, and that's when the talks start, right? But what's happening down in the United States right now, where they've just basically, they kidnapped the president of Venezuela. Now they want to move their oil companies in or have free access to their oils, or maybe not free. It is the capitalist market. We have to be concerned with that because a vast majority of our oil goes south of the border. So how reliant on us for oil is the United States now? So we have to work with the Alberta NDP when they form government to find a better way to do business, or a different way to do business. And finding a different way to do business isn't Danielle Smith. It's Naheed Nenshi and the Alberta NDP. Because we'll come up with the ideas that protect the oil field workers, but also create new industries for people to go into.
So what I'll suggest, I'll just close out the show by saying you should definitely check out Rob Ashton's full policy plan on his website. Link will be in the description of this podcast. You can find it on his Twitter account too, in which there's been a lot of buzzing enthusiasm about his campaign. And you should join the NDP while you still have the chance, if you still have the chance. And if you are a member of the NDP, you should absolutely vote for Rob Ashton. That's who I'll be voting for. And I've never joined a political party in Canada up to this point. This is like pretty big for me. I vote generally for NDP, but I never was enthusiastic about the party to become, a member, in the sense that it was for me like the party who, was the better party of the choices. So I generally vote NDP when given the chance. But I'm very enthusiastic about your campaign. I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks, my friend. I really appreciate you having me on here tonight.
Awesome.